Welcome to the 44th Annual Old Dominion University Literary Festival. Our theme this year, Afterwards, highlights stories that address the storms of past and present and the changes wrought upon us as we turn to face the future. I'm Kent Wascom, co-director of the festival, along with my colleague, Katherine Jackson, and we'd like to thank you all for being here today for a reading by author Kelly Jo Ford. Following the reading, we will have time for audience members to ask questions. So if you're out there, please post your questions in the comments and I'll be sure to put them to our writer. In his novel, In the Skin of a Lion, Michael Ondaatje uses an epigraph taken from writer and art historian John Berger. Never again will a single story be told as though it were the only one. Our stories are often told as lone, linear streams running uninterrupted towards some predetermined endpoint. But it is our greatest art that gathers stories, gathers seemingly individual lives, and braids them. Not through the mere artifice of narrative, but with the resonance of love and blood and history that runs through us all. Kelly Jo Ford's debut novel and stories, Crooked Hallelujah, is such a gathering of lives and such a work of art. Released to universal acclaim, including accolades from NPR, the New York Times, the Washington Post, Time Magazine, and more. Longlisted for the PEN/Hemingway Award for the debut novel, the Story Prize, the Carnegie Medal for Excellence in Fiction, and the Center for Fiction's First Novel Prize. Kelly Jo Ford is the recipient of the Paris Review's Plimpton Prize, the Everett Southwest Literary Award, a Native Arts and Cultures Foundation, National Artist Fellowship, and an Elizabeth George Foundation grant, as well as a Dobie Paisano Fellowship. She teaches writing at the Institute of American Indian Arts and is a citizen of the Cherokee Nation. It's my honor to welcome to the stage Kelly Jo Ford.
Thank you so much, Kent, for that lovely, lovely introduction. I am so happy to be here with you all. Thank you for inviting me. And I think that I will just get going with the reading for this evening. I'm going to read a story from the early middle of the book, I guess I'll call it. It's a story called The Year 2003 minus 20. And I say story. Some people may think of it as a chapter. I think of the book as a novel in stories, but I think it can be approached really either way, as a linked collection, as a novel, or as that squishy middle, which is really my favorite form, is the novel in stories. So I'll just take off and read for you a bit, and then I would love to chat with you all. The year 2003 minus 20. Reenie's bones can feel a fight long before the rest of her wakes to the rising voices and clattering bottles. She is 8, almost 9. Granny and Lula live in a new rent house across the tracks and down a long hill. Not so very far. Over there, standing on a chair, rolling up balls of dough as Granny's hearing aids whistle, or lying curled into Granny's great body napping is Reenie's best place. But Reenie knows that her place is with her mom. Tonight, Reenie is leaning against the bathroom door jamb with her arms crossed, watching Justine and Christy, a junior in high school with permed black hair and thighs that bulge around her cutoffs. The young women dig into a pink suitcase of makeup samples that just arrived in the mail. Emerald Noir, fancy, Christy says, opening a plastic eyeshadow tray. I can't believe you signed up. Wrote a check. Won't cost anybody anything, says Justine. And it, Christine says, and they laugh like bouncing a check is the funniest thing in the world. Reenie doesn't laugh. Just kidding, Justine says, tossing a cotton ball at her. Besides, if I get good at this, we'll be in our own place before you know it. We'll probably get a pink Cadillac and drive to Dallas and dine with Mary Kay herself. Oh, I'm definitely skipping school for that, Christy says, bumping Reenie with her butt. I ain't never seen a vampire. Reenie and Justine rent the 2 upstairs bedrooms of this big, old, rickety house from Christy's mom, who Justine worked with on the line before switching to days. Reenie likes it here okay. Christy lets her come into her room and listen to albums sometimes. She lets her watch television with her and her friends after school. Justine isn't quiet like she was at Granny and Lula's, isn't so mad. Justine makes a V with her fingers. She puts them over Christie's cheeks and tells her to hold still and quit grinning. She colors in dark rouge, first on Christie's cheekbones and then her own, just the way the lady had shown her. She pulls out a lipstick to match the rouge and turns to Renee. Sure you don't want to get dolled up, Bean? Renee shakes her head. The lipstick is so dark it looks almost black in the fluorescent light of the bathroom mirror. Doesn't matter. You're the prettiest little Indian I ever did see. Justine rolls her lips together, smoothing the lipstick, and then kisses a piece of toilet paper and hands it to Renee. Makeup, Justine had said, was just one reason they couldn't live with Granny and Lula, who quoted Timothy so much that Renee could mouth the entire scripture along with her. In like manner also that women adorn themselves and so on. Oh, in modest apparel with shamefacedness and sobriety and so on. Renee could count on Justine to follow with a crack about Timothy's next verse, women staying in silence and subjugation. Then there would be stretches, long stretches of hard quiet, and they were just better off here, so said Justine. Renee takes the toilet paper, presses her own lips to it, rolls them in the color. She stands on her tiptoes in front of Justine and looks in the mirror, then wipes her lips with the back of her arm. A good time crew from the factory drifts in and out of the house. Cigarette butts transform ashtrays into morning after volcanoes. Renee turns the ash-dusted tabletops into canvases, tracing hearts in her path when she creeps to the kitchen in the morning quiet. Men, some with union money to spare, bring occasional gifts, a bone-handled jackknife, a book of knots, the licks of a bobtailed dog. They fill the house with noise and a sweet-smelling smoke that Renee has come to know. They leave behind safety glasses, a stray sock here or there. One leaves the Waylon and Willie record that Renee keeps stashed beneath her bed. If being with my ex taught me anything, Justine says. So sorry, that's the very needy watchdog. Um, if being with my ex taught me anything, Justine says, it's take not 1 ounce of shit from a man. Justine, who won't call Kenny by name anymore, holds her eyeliner to the flame of a match to soften it before touching her eyelid. Renee leans in the doorway, waiting for the familiar sermon. You can't trust a man to take care of you. Remember that, Renee. You can't trust them at all, for that matter. They'll lie to get what they want, and they always want something. Justine steps over Renee and disappears into the kitchen. She's going to work tonight at the second job she's picked up, waiting tables at a cowboy bar. Justine walks back in with a shot glass of tequila. I wish you wouldn't go to that job, Renee says. The low-cut blouse Justine has to wear makes Renee feel equal parts angry and embarrassed. Well, I wish Granny and Lula didn't have to walk to the laundromat. Wishing won't get that washing machine out of layaway. Justine does a little shake with her hips, holds up her tequila, and winks at Renee. Renee digs through Justine's purse and finds the lemon-shaped squeeze bottle and disposable salt shaker. She passes the salt and squeezes a bit of lemon into her own mouth before handing it up to Justine, who had already licked the back of her hand. I go and prepare a place for you, Justine says, before giving the salt a shake and drinking the tequila down. She cackles, then gets mock serious. Maybe. Renee isn't sure. She says, Father, forgive me. Kenny seemed good-natured enough until he didn't. After him, men ran together in Renee's mind. There could have been 1 or 10. There was the one who traveled around sharpening barber's razors and scissors and prided himself on keeping the kitchen knives sharp. There was a rodeo clown with a sweet dog and his own bag of makeup. Then there was the one whose friend owned the bar where Justine worked. This one wore a .38 special in a holster he clipped to the inside of his cowboy boot. He had a long red ponytail, plenty of money, but no job. After Justine ended it the first time, he stood at the bottom of her bedroom window, crying and strumming a guitar. The second time, he snuck into her locker at the plant and filled her purse with poison ivy. Renee doesn't know what her mom is looking for in the men or the nonstop working. She doesn't know what makes her mom squeeze her so hard and so long sometimes that it seems like all the air might leave Renee's chest for good. What makes her sit up all night watching Renee sleep some nights and stay up making noise with the good time gang others. Rini doesn't understand what makes it so hard for her mom to keep still. As far as Rini can tell, they don't need much at all, and between the one job and Granny and Lula, they have all they might need ever in the world. Like a cowboy from Waylon and Willie come to life, in saunters the jockey from Texas. A towhead with blue eyes and skin like orange leather, Pitch stands a whole head shorter than Justine. Despite his size, he fills the house with bellowing laughter and a Texas jangle, tight as a new barbed wire fence. He doesn't drink much. When he's around, whatever it is that keeps Justine wound so tight seems to ease up. He buys Renee a Zebco reel one visit, then shows back up to take her and Granny fishing. He lets her braid racehorse mane and stand in winner's circle pictures. Renee beams when he remembers to leave her eggs runny and fry her bologna black on the edges. One Friday morning before school, Justine's flurry of getting to work on time chaos comes to a stop in the kitchen doorway. She stands there, tying her hair up in a bun, watching as Pitch flips a pancake shaped more or less like Texas. It grazes the ceiling, and Renee doubles over giggling as Pitch stretches himself as far as he can to catch the pancake before it slaps onto the floor. When Renee straightens, she notices Justine's eyes are not on Pitch, but on the sink filled with dishes. Go comb your hair, Bean, Justine says. She sticks her safety glasses in her shirt pocket. I have to go, and you don't have time to be playing. But we made God's country for breakfast, Pitch says, offering her a plate. You better be out there when the bus comes, Renee, Justine says. Pitch and Renee listen to her bang down the hallway. When the front door closes, Pitch makes a scary face that gets Renee laughing all over again. But as she lies in bed that night, worry washes over her. She knows the beats of their old apartment by heart. 2 doors slammed, one after another, meant guaranteed trouble. The sound of skin hitting skin had been rare, but Renee's bones zapped like a mosquito trap before it happened. She remembers the grunts and knocks of 2 people falling together in a room, still stupidly, lovingly trying not to wake a child. She knew when she would be herded from her room before she had half of what she wanted and driven across town where she would wake up at Granny and Lula's. If only one door slammed, Justine might sneak into Renee's room. Crying, she would curl into the bed beside Renee and stroke her hair until the night hummed quiet. Renee loves her mother more than anything. She feels thankful for this old house and goofy Pitch, but she can't shake her uneasiness. She squeezes her eyes shut and whispers a prayer for all of it, all of them. He didn't invent the pancake, you know, Justine says as they pull into Granny and Lula's driveway, or tap a maple tree. Justine had to pick up a Saturday shift, and Renee knows she is annoyed that Pitch left to gallop horses before the sun came up. He had said he was going to take her fishing. The ride over was quiet, and now Justine's words seemed to come from the middle of a conversation, an argument. I'm glad I get to see Granny today, Renee says. She opens the door and pulls on her backpack. It's okay. Justine takes a deep breath before leaning over for a hug. Pitch is never going to leave Texas, Renee. Plus, he's got girlfriends from in every town from here to Santa Anita. Don't get attached. Well, he wouldn't if you told him not to, Renee says. And he doesn't have another me. Justine begins to make excuses when they go fishing. She tries to stay out of the photos, but Renee pulls her back into the frames. When he goes back to his beloved Texas or packs up his gear for another track town, the good time crew returns. And to Renee, its edges feel sharper than before. Renee gets up for a drink of water, but stops at the foot of the stairs. The ponytail guy is kicked back on the couch. His feet rest on the coffee table, and he's hugged up on Justine, whispering in her ear. What's that sorry sack of snakes doing here, Renee says. She can't believe how calm she sounds. Did he bring you some calamine lotion? She had been nearly sleepwalking before, but now she's wide awake. Renee, you need to mind your business, Justine says. Get back to bed. Her mascara is smeared. Renee stomps up the stairs, thirsty. 2 nights later, Renee hears his voice downstairs again. Justine's been picking up more shifts at the bar. Nobody wants to buy the Mary Kay, and Justine and Christy have gone through most of it themselves. Justine won't let anybody answer the phone because of bill collectors. Ponytail Guy laughs. His low voice rumbles through the walls, up the banister, and under her bedroom door where it rattles her bones. When they begin to yell, Reenie's feet hardly touch the stairs before she's in the living room and sees that they have already passed through the fight into something else. Go to bed, sweet girl, Justine says. She pulls away from his embrace and glances at the coffee table, full of party stuff. In the middle of it all, a leather holster with a metal clip swaddles the 38. Reenie's about to say something else, something that will probably get her into big trouble when she feels a hand on her neck. It's Christy. Come on, Beanie Weenie, Christy says. Let's go upstairs. Reenie goes, but she cannot get her mother's eyes out of her mind. There was something wild about them, something sad. She waits until she hears her mother's bedroom door close. Then she waits some more, watching the flames of the gas heater dance on her walls. When she knows they won't be awake for a very long time, she creeps back down the stairs. The gun is heavier than she expected, the handle 100 sharp, tiny teeth in her hands. When she turns back toward the stairs, she accidentally kicks over his cowboy boots. They're expensive, with lizard toe boxes and garish stitching up and down the shaft. She grinds the heel of her foot into one boot's counter and the other one's toe box. Then she carries the gun upstairs to her room. She sits on her bed and holds the gun in her lap. Reenie thinks about what she might do next. She could walk to Granny and Lula's for good, bury the gun on the side of the road, far away from anybody who might do any harm with it. Once she got to Granny and Lula, she would wash her hands and face, and maybe get something sweet out of the fridge. Then she'd go get in bed with Granny, where everything would be all right as all right could be. She could put on a mask and hold up the store on the corner where the man behind the counter always made her feel like she was stealing anyway. She'd take the money and all the Reese's Pieces in the place. She'd leave a trail of them to her Cookson Hills hideout and send her mom a letter telling her all their troubles were over, telling her she could follow the Reese's trail, but only if she came alone and ate the evidence. Reenie cocks the gun, then holds the hammer and gently releases the trigger. She doesn't know how she knows to do this, but she does. She does it again and again. Then she gets on her knees and puts the gun deep under her bed next to Waylon and Willie. The next morning, when Reenie goes downstairs, Ponytail Guy's pacing the living room, wearing nothing but jeans and an unbuckled belt. He has long red hair spilling off of his big toes that make Reenie sick. Justine is sitting on the couch chewing a thumbnail. The party stuff is still strewn on the coffee table before her. Where is it? He says to Reenie. Doesn't really seem like a question. She settles on the couch next to her mom and tucks her legs deep into her sleep shirt, and rests her chin on her knees. Where's my fucking gun? He says again. Justine stands but doesn't go after him like Reenie expects her to. I told you, you probably left it at the bar. Reenie wouldn't dare touch your gun. I don't leave it anywhere, he says, starting to yell. That's the fucking point, Justine. It was right here, and somebody stole it. He stomps down the hall. When he starts banging on Christy's door, Reenie runs up the stairs. She gets on her hands and knees and inches under the bed for the gun. When she gets a hold of it now, it no longer feels like power, possibilities. It feels just like the danger she always knew it was, and she wants it far away from all of them. When Reenie gets to the hallway, Justine is stepping between him and a messy-haired, cursing Christy. Here, Reenie says, shoving the gun at her mom. He yanks the gun from Justine before she can react and takes one hard step toward Reenie. Justine slaps both of her hands against his chest, pushing him back into the living room and out the front door. Reenie hears him shout, about like a bunch of Indians, and runs over to the window in time to see him yanking open the door to his truck. Justine bursts back through the door and grabs his boots. She throws them from the porch all the way to the driveway. And Reenie smiles. I don't know what I'm going to do with you, Justine says. Reenie's been getting into trouble at school. She leaves her lunch sack on the kitchen counter and won't eat all day long. She feigns a stomachache if Justine works overtime and talks back to Lula. Granny gives Renee her own key and says it doesn't matter if nobody's home. She can always come inside. She can always stay. Even stern Lula nods her head and says always. But as soon as Justine drops her off, Renee starts walking home. The belt doesn't work. When Justine catches her trying to light a roach left in an ashtray, that's it. She ties her hair up in a bun and spends an entire Sunday cleaning house. Then she gets on the phone. The next weekend, Pitch makes the drive across the Red River and into Oklahoma, even though he didn't have a race. The next, Renee crouches at the top of the stairs, listening to the two of them talk deep into the night. Pitch stays for 3 weeks before Renee suspects its good time crew might be gone for good. They take her to Padlock Pizza to tell her they're getting married. The three of them are moving to Texas and she'll get a horse. Renee's eyes well with tears. Though she is no farther from Granny than she had been a minute before, she thinks her heart might burst from the way she suddenly misses Granny. Dear Granny, who speaks Cherokee best and wraps her up in arms that smell like shower to shower and something good cooked over the stove. A single gray braid curling to the middle of her back, she crushes Renee's bones the good way, like only love can. Justine sits across the table from Renee and Pitch, and Renee can feel her waiting for a response. Not knowing today would be special, Renee has brought along a book of knots and one of Pitch's lead ropes. Parmesan cheese and red peppers balance on either side of her open book, holding open the page for bowline knots. Renee sets the jars off the book and lets the book slap shut. She feels the long skeleton key that hangs from a piece of twine to the middle of her chest. Granny and Lula's back door is still held together by a cast iron rim lock with a heavy doorknob that feels like a small heart in Renee's hand. Renee looks at her mom there waiting. Renee never had a dad. She didn't think she was missing anything. She thought about Ponytail Guy and Kenny. She thought about her mom, beautiful, unable to let herself come to a rest no matter how hard she worked. And then there was Pitch, sitting next to her, loudly finishing his Dr. Pepper with a straw. Is it going to be a paint horse? Renee asks. We can get you an Indian pony if that's what you want, Pitch says. He grins and hugs her against his side. Then he props Justine's elbow on the table and takes the rope and flips it around Justine's arm. This here is the rabbit, he says, holding up one end. And this here is Mr. Rabbit's home, he says as he makes the loop. He shakes Justine's arm. This is the tree. Justine sighs and rolls her eyes, but plays along as he runs the rope up through the rabbit hole, around the tree, and back home. Renee reaches across the table to try it. What about your job at the plant? Renee asks, rounding Justine's arm with the rope. Justine shrugs. With her free hand, she pulls a string of cheese from the slice she'd put on Renee's plate and drops it into her mouth. She smiles a little, and Renee can't tell if it's forced. I was looking for a job when I found that one. I reckon I can find something. And with that, it's decided. When her bones buzz her awake that night, all she hears is the gas heater's low hiss. There had been a party, but it was across the street. She had fallen asleep to the muffled thumping of country music and occasional bursts of laughter. Now everything is quiet. Confused, she chalks it up to nerves. Still, she's too unsettled to sleep. She flips one of Granny's tied quilts to the bottom of the bed and walks across the hallway. She puts her ear against her mom's door, but hears nothing that would set her bones so abuzz. When she pushes into the room, she finds Justine and Pitch crouched on the floor before the window, a wool Pendleton blanket over their shoulders. New neighbors are fighting, Justine whispers. Relief moves through Renee's limbs. Whatever it was that had woken her is outside. She and her mom are safe inside this house. In Texas, there would be a whole house and a paint. Maybe the nights would be punctuated with barking dogs and stamping horses. Maybe Texas would be quiet. From the darkness, the three of them kneel before the window, looking down across the street. Bare oak limbs spider their view. Pitch pounds the frame twice with the palm of his hand to break the seal. And when the window pops up, cold air blows across them, and the branches rattle. Renee shivers in her sleep shirt. She reaches up and slides her finger across the fogged glass, drawing a heart that drips down her arm. Justine opens up the blanket, the one that Granny had saved money for to buy for Justine when she graduated 8th grade. Justine pulls Renee close, kisses the top of her head. A yellow bulb from the porch lights the man from behind as he stands over the neighbor lady. The man's hair seems to glow, but his face is a shadow. Renee hasn't seen him before, but she can imagine just what he looks like in the light. From up above, Renee, Justine, and Pitch have just watched the woman run down the cement steps, her long brown hair streaming behind her. They heard the smack when she slapped him. When he pushed her away, the woman fell onto her back in the dry yellow grass and kicked at him. The man bellows, her name lost in his throat, and grabs at her foot. She needs help, Renee says. Pitch is already reaching for his wadded up jeans, and Justine has started for the phone. They are too late. From down the street comes the sound of sirens. Renee presses her forehead against the cold metal screen. Two cops, one Indian and one white, jump out of the car, and it seems to Renee that everybody across the street starts yelling at once. The man is on his stomach now, the white cop's knee in his back. The woman cries out and flashes up the steps inside. When she's outside and down the steps, one of the cops shouts, "Gun, gun, gun," and it is so. 3 quick shots. Pitch covers his head with his hands and ducks before wedging himself between Renee and the window. Justine too reaches for Renee, tries to cover her eyes. The white cop is on the ground now, and so is the woman. The man with the glowing hair struggles to his knees and cries out in a voice so wild, so full of despair and love, that it shakes Renee from the inside out. Pitch tries to pull the window shut, but now it's stuck open. He puts all of his weight behind it, but it will not close. Instead, he grabs the pull down vinyl shade, but he fumbles it, and it springs up inside its roller. "Real nice setup you got here," Pitch says. "Nice town." "There's work," Justine hisses, straining to pick Renee up. Pitch doesn't answer. He takes a deep breath and drapes the blanket over the rolled up blind. Then he slides down the wall to the floor. Renee, she wraps her legs around Justine's waist, locks them at her ankles. Everyone is quiet as Justine carries Renee over to the bed. Pitch, looking smaller than before, stays put. Justine pulls Renee's head to her chest. Renee can tell that her mom is quiet crying, so she is relieved to hear Justine's heart pound steady and regular, if a little too fast, a little too loud. Renee thinks she's too old to stay in her mom's lap, but she doesn't care. She settles her head onto Justine's shoulder and closes her eyes. Even after the flashing lights spin out of the room and the sound of the siren deepens before growing faint, Justine and Pitch stay fixed to their places, as if they are on a stage, waiting for curtains that will not come. And I could read another pretty short story, or Kent, you and I could just start to chat. Do you have a preference?
I'm happy to chat. I would always love to hear the work.
Let's chat.
But let's talk.
Yeah,
Let's talk.
I mean,
And for everybody out there, let those questions fly. We'll be able to see them. And we'll get on. But I definitely have questions of my own. And maybe the first one, and and I apologize if it's a well-worn question for you at this stage, but I think it would be really interesting for folks to hear. And that's no, we've got an immediate question from someone, so I'll table mine and put one of our MFA students, Rich's question. Kelly Jo, would you care to talk about the genesis of the inspiration of the novel, which Rich found came across as very genuine and familiar with? So yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for the question, Rich. It is a really personal story. The bones of the story is kind of what I call it. Like the bones of the story are really similar to my life growing up. In that I was raised in a household when I was little with my great grandmother. and my grandmother and my mom, who was really young when she had me. So when I was really little, I got to live in a house with four generations of us. And I keep, as I wrote, like if I had a fellowship or something, I took this picture with me always. So I
Uh,
always had, you know, them with me as
yeah,
I wrote. And so, the great grandmother character, especially, is really inspired by my great grandmother, and then kind of the movement of the story, leaving Indian country, when Rini, the main character in the story, I read when she's young. That's something that my mom and I did when my mom married my dad, and so I think a lot of the story was just inspired by being raised by powerful, strong-willed women, who love fiercely, and yeah, and by like this idea kind of it's a lot of me, like just sort of like maybe like a meditation on mothers and grandmothers, and there's a scene in another story where, after they leave Texas, Rini is standing on these bales of hay, looking back to Oklahoma,
yeah,
because they moved like a mile from the Red River, and that's very much kind of like an emotional truth for me. Like, moving, having a new home as a kid, but always like having been raised with such strong connection with my grandmothers, um, feeling that sense of loss as well. So it's definitely inspired by, the movement of my life, although it's fiction and they're characters, and they get to have their own mistakes and joys and battles. That's not all. It's certainly not a memoir, but it's inspired.
yeah. Thank you for that answer. Um, one of the things that struck me, I mean, this is a minor thing that struck me, but still a powerful and important thing, I think, um, is how much popular culture shows up in this book. And I say that as someone who maybe you had this experience too, but who went through writing workshops and classrooms where teachers very frequently said, don't put the name of a brand in your story. It will date your story. Don't
Right.
say the television show. It will do it. And I just wonder if you had that experience, or thought about that while you did it, because among the accrual of lives and experiences in there, there's an accrual of detail, and like, I mean, just in the excerpt you read, because I had a little list in a notebook which I should not have left at home, but like, I hadn't heard shower to shower since I was a child at my grandparents' house, and like that's, or hadn't seen that, or even thought about that. And I just think that's so interesting. But I wonder if you could talk a bit about the presence of that in your work.
Sure. I mean, I want my work to be dated. I feel like for me, like I mean, the title of that story is 2003 minus 20. So I want, which was funny. Like some people talked about it as historical fiction. I was like, wait a minute. Oh my God.
No.
Um, but I want work. I am most interested in and drawn to work that takes place in a particular place and time. I want to feel like I'm somewhere in a particular moment. And so I think that's just really be like crawling through memories. Shower to shower does smell like my grandmother. I don't even know if they still make it, but I can still smell it.
Yeah.
And so I think that, accrual of details for me is often what I'm really drawn to. And so maybe that's what I was going through, for, probably subconsciously mostly, but it's kind of
Mm.
funny because there was a time when I was like definitely like anti, like, like I don't I had a stance. I have fewer stances now that I'm older, but I had a stance that, like, you didn't want to like put like a song that everyone knew in your stories, because then you're relying on an atmosphere, that someone else created, which is really
Right.
rich because there's songs throughout, like, and that was a stance I had, I think, as when I was taking writing workshops myself, and it felt like an important stance, like we must create our own atmosphere, but like our atmosphere is made up of of music, I don't know. I just don't have as many stances now.
I think I'm glad you said that, because I feel that myself too. I wonder if that's a process of, if not gaining knowledge, then at least gaining more experience. You have
Yeah.
fewer and fewer maxims and like firm positions in that way, or at least ones that you're going to say to someone of like, "Hey, don't do
I
that."
think it's just getting tired.
It's the mileage. Um, or here we have a question from Desiree, who also grew up with several generations of family, and asks you, Kelly Jo, if you feel that having that experience made you feel older in some ways. Um, and to append to that, what were some of the most important things that those generations around you taught you?
Really good questions. Those are hard questions. I don't know that it made me feel older, but I know that have always felt a really really strong connection to elders, and I think I don't. It seems maybe like a natural result of being getting like I always joke with my daughter who sleeps with our puppy who was barking at the mail person in a daily ritual. They sleep together, and we talk. We always kind of joke about their subconsciousness, like intermingling and sharing dreams. But growing up, I slept with my great grandmother when I was little. Like when we all lived together, we sure didn't have a big house, and that was where I slept. And then once I moved away and visited, I slept with Granny. So I just think that it left me with like deep reverence and respect and like for elders. I don't know about making me like feel older or act older. I think that I've been um, done lots of immature things that that I wouldn't necessarily want to talk to others about. But I feel like probably in the way that I was explained, like the looking across back toward Oklahoma from the bale of hay feels like an emotional truth. I when I see often an older person in the crowd, they probably look at me like, "Why are you staring at me?" Because I think I'm probably like projecting a lot of love,
Yeah,
just towards strangers. And some of the most important things they taught me. Um, I don't know. I feel like I would have to think about that for a long time to be able to say something that was actually real and true. I mean, I just, when I think about being with particularly like Granny Conley or another Grandma Longshore, I think about like safety and absolute complete acceptance. And I think I think that that's a really beautiful thing that I still need to learn from, you know.
yeah, for sure.
Thank you for the question, Desiree.
Yeah,
Those are really good questions. I'm going to keep thinking about them.
indeed, indeed. Um, well, my before another question crops up, I want to get my selfish one in, and
Okay.
it's about Rini. Um, I knew Arini, not like the person, though it was natural to start drawing parallels, but a person by that name, and I had never read it again. I'd never heard it or seen it again in a work of fiction or anywhere
Mhm.
else. Could you talk a bit about where, if not the name choice, but where that character came from?
Sure. Well, I mean, I'll talk about the name choice
Please.
also. Like, so I had a grandmother who, like, not a grandmother by blood, by love, who adopted me, and her name's Rita Irene, and so Rini comes from Irene.
Oh,
Um, so grandmothers through and through, even in the kids in this book. And where she comes from, I don't know. I think that there's a little bit of me in there. I think there's a little bit of my daughter in there who's 8 now.
yeah,
Um, and so a lot of writing Rini, definitely changed over the years. And I worked on this book for a really long time. I didn't know that I was writing this book. The earliest story comes from the second half of the book, Bonita, one of the fire stories. If you're familiar with
yep.
the book, um, that's the earliest story in terms of when it was written.
Huh.
So I gradually got to know this family, and it felt like it felt like a flaw that I kept writing short stories with the same people in the same place, and I was just kind of slow to come around and realize I was working on something bigger instead of, one short story at a time. So I had to come to know the story in that way. And so Rini evolved. I was writing Justine stories first.
Mm,
And as I realized I was writing this family, like, their lives are so enmeshed and intertwined with one another throughout their lives that, like Rini's story is Justine's story, is Lula's story. And so I don't know, like where Rini comes from, I think it's just me like reaching back toward home and also getting to know a kid in a new way now as a mom. When I first started writing the book, I wasn't a mom. Um,
mm,
so I think that she changed a lot. And I think the younger Rini stories, if I think that this is right. I think most of those were written later, probably after I was a mom and living with a kid on my own.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, in the excerpt that you read for us today, this quality that the book itself has throughout, but it's definitely evident there is that this kind of wonderful refraction that happens between mother and daughter. Like it's always a mirror flip, like one of those like a cosmetic mirror that you can kind
Yeah.
of flip over. Between the two of them, it can happen mid sentence. It happens over the course of a paragraph, or sometimes that recognition and realization happens over the course of a story. Um, it's a remarkable thing, for sure. And well, since you brought up the fire, I one of the things I wanted to know also was if there was a particular period of time that you found yourself more excited, more interested, or just more compelled to write about, or maybe even one that was more of a struggle, that was more difficult to
Mhm.
access.
Um, it's like someone who like certainly doesn't work from an outline and needs to kind of like just I just work from a feeling essentially, and then I try to figure out what like eventually hopefully find my way to a plot and characters and all that. I I I think that it just depended on what period of time I was writing because I wrote it over so many years.
Yeah.
So like the fire stories, I was writing that because I think I needed to work through some stuff. Like my parents lived through a wildfire that
Yeah.
got very close to their home, and they were packing and loading boxes, and I was on the other side of the country, not
Mm,
wanting to bother them or interfere with them needing to do, but like just wanting to call and say, "Are you okay?" This stuff is not important. So like
yeah.
again, like the emotion, like I felt like I was thinking a lot about I don't know, like big picture climate change, but also just like what that feels like to people who are living, with the effects of it, like just at a really like micro level of like, do you take the baby books or do you just leave kind of stuff. So in that moment, those were the stories that I needed to tell. And then and then later stories, I felt like I was needing to write for a different reason. But I think to answer like what I struggled with the most was figuring out how to start the book. And
Mm,
so it wasn't really about like a different time period that was more difficult to write about because I really enjoy like researching an era if I don't know as much about it. I like reading, learning about the details, like what like I talked with I think Paul Reyes from VQR about whether or not the truck from one of the fire stories would have a cassette tape that would be able to auto flip, you
oh,
know,
yeah.
you know like
Yeah.
or is it called auto reverse, I don't remember what it's called, but like I love that kind of stuff. Like that is, it can feel like procrastination, but it's so fun, and it's just a different kind of like writing. So writing an era that's not that familiar to me, like 1974, that's not like, that's really fun and enjoyable, but I couldn't figure out how to begin the story because I had all of these stories here, and it just took me a really long time, one, to wrap my head around how to open a book that's going to introduce this particular family with their own set of problems and joys and all that love and all that stuff, and also this like church community that would be really unfamiliar to, I don't know what, like 80% of 90%
Yeah.
of the people who read it, maybe more, as well as like a region that most people wouldn't be that familiar with who are coming to the book. and then, and their particular family dynamic. So figuring out how to open the books was really hard, took a long time. And then just to get that story right was hard. My agent and I went back and forth on it for a couple of years. Like, I didn't work on it straight for a couple of years, but I would work on it, put it away, send it back, get some feedback, and keep going. So that was the hardest, I think.
Yeah.
And yeah, and then late there was a lot. Everything was hard.
Right.
Later, like, so as a person who really is an intuitive writer who just feels my way into a story, later, like working with my agent on the book as a whole, and then with my editor Elizabeth at Grove, if I needed to write a story for a certain period of time, I like writing a story to do something for the book and not because like my little writer heart was wanted to. That was a new position for me to be in,
Yeah.
and really
Yeah.
uncomfortable.
It's a weird
Um,
spot.
and especially, I don't know if this is true. I would love to hear what you think. I feel like it's harder for a short story to do that because I feel like a short story is closer, like kind of a middle space between a poem and a novel,
Yeah.
and you don't write a poem for a purpose. And so maybe I was being a little bit like overly precious or something about about it, but it was really hard for me to need to write a story.
No, that doesn't feel precious to me at all. As someone who is incredibly resistant to prompts
Uh-huh.
and also who's struggled, I have with the short form. Like my
Mhm.
brain kind of works with a novel and with short fiction. I mean, I can think of chapters and sections as like mini
Mhm.
novellas and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that's helpful for me. But if tasked with a short story and like making it do these jobs and these things that this particular form um, can only do that only that form
Mhm.
can achieve real in a lot of ways. Yeah, no, not not possible. I think I would be squirming. um, but speaking of this, like as you said, the squishy spot between the novel, the collection, and everything else. um, I'm just so curious to hear your thoughts both about this form of a novel, um, but also like maybe if not how you came to it, but if you've shared this experience too, which another, I guess I'm unburdening a lot of my like the people's hangups that they laid on me, but another of those was, or I no, I'll say I've heard a lot of folks who've written um, linked collections
Mhm.
and written novels that do not follow a traditional linear form, right? A single
Mhm.
character through to the end,
Mhm.
who've been faced with a heck of a lot of editorial pushback or just ignorance, like being ignored. That this is treated as something that's not marketable with a
Mhm.
capital M. Like, did you deal with any of that?
Not at Grove. I mean,
Not
I'm
in
nothing
Grove.
at Grove. I'm so grateful to be there and that Elizabeth read my manuscript, and she just, I think, absolutely got it from the beginning, like what I wanted to do. And what she wanted to do was help me make what I wanted to do the best book it could possibly be. I really didn't. She saw it for what it was and she believed in it and she got behind it and she supported it. And I just feel really, really lucky. Um, and Grove was our only offer,
Mm,
and I just feel really lucky as a debut author for to have had that experience. I think that um, I think a lot of editors read it and said, we don't really know what to do with this. Like, we think this is great. And when she has a novel, like, come back to us. So I think that that was certainly happening, but it made its way to Grove. So, like, folks out there who are working on your weird, beautiful literary books that people might say, what is this going to be? And maybe you're not even sure. Like, there are editors out there who want to support um, writers who are doing things that might be a little bit different or might not be as like marketable in in like the traditional world publishing. Like, I don't know. I just want to, like, if there are MFA folks out here or other writers who are working on books, I want to encourage you to you should not think about what's marketable. I think I think that you should write the thing that you most feel called and compelled, and you most feel like you need to write. And that's ultimately like you're, I don't know. I think I don't I know that I couldn't sell something that I was trying to write for. Again, could hardly even write stories for for a book that almost existed for a purpose. I couldn't like set out to try to figure out what would sell.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I was hoping. I mean, I was hoping you'd say all of that, but it's just so. I mean, this book especially, and there, as there are many, 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 thousands upon thousands of novels that do not take a traditional form or shape, or
Mhm.
certainly that exist and contain or pieces that could be seen as contained. And yeah, I'd like to say the same thing to everyone out there. Of like, look at the success of this work and see that like the whatever the amount of naysaying and whatever amount of the walls that are put in front of you by people like that, the work itself will shove them away, and the work that you do on it will. And but yeah, I could turn this into the Grove is Awesome show because I certainly feel the same way. Elizabeth is who she picked my book out of the thing too.
I was going
um,
to ask, Elizabeth's your editor as well.
Peter Blackstock's my editor, but Elizabeth acquired it, and
Okay.
she gave it to the then. We were both the same age. He was a sub junior editor, and they gave it to him, and then when we tagged up. But she's will always be like the angel that like came down
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
said yes. But let's see. Oh, and you were mentioning working with your agent on the manuscript. And I know a lot of writers have just a variety of levels of relationship with their agents. Like some
Mhm.
people, like they send a book in and an agent's working with them consistently. Other people, the agent's there to work on a contract and that's it.
Mhm.
They,
Right.
like, they sign off on things and like you deal with your editor. I was wondering if you could talk a bit more about that relationship you have with your agent and how that developed over time.
Sure. I think that I think I have the best agent in the world. If you have amazing manuscripts working on, send them to Adam Eaglin. But he is really, really. I think he's really special because again, I was working on a pretty different book when we met, and it was. Um, I was working on stories. It was not as focused on the family,
Mm,
um, and also my structure was more thematically like this book is a lot of different points of view, but it's ultimately is chronological, which I think helps bring those points of view together. I think it was a good choice, but a whole lot changed while we worked together. We worked together for years. He was really patient, and my editor, and there are many out there like this. I think especially. If you go to what are called boutique agencies, kind of smaller agencies, he's interested in the editorial, and that's I think a part of the job that he really loves. And so I work on something a really long time before I let it out the door because it's just my nature. And also I'm lucky in that my first reader is my husband, who's a poet and a writer, so it's really nice. um, I always say if prose writers, if you happen to be able to, if marrying a poet is an option, it's a good option for your work. um, so but Adam is, I guess, almost my first reader. Once it goes out of the house, it goes to Adam, and I get his feedback, and we talk about it, and we worked for a long time on the individual stories, and he ultimately had to rein me in and say, okay, let's just start sharing the manuscript back and forth. Now, I like as a short story writer, that's just kind of like that's what I'm drawn to do. Is just get granular with the story, and I would have probably been happy to still be going back and forth with him story by story if he hadn't said, "Okay, let's do this. It's time to really start to get ready to send this thing out." So yeah, so I feel like that's the kind of like when we started working together, that's exactly what I needed. And I think for the next book, if there's a next book, hopefully one day there will be. Sometimes it feels really far away, but I think that's what I will need then because I like that kind of relationship.
It's a
So
wonderful.
it's great. There are agents out there, folks who enjoy that. So um, I think it's important to think about what you're looking for and be ready when you talk to, when you get that request for a full manuscript and a phone call, to you ask questions too and think about what kind of relationship you'd like.
That is so helpful. That's such a helpful thing. Well, I think we have now come to the unfortunate limit of our time, but thank you so much, Kelly Jo. I truly appreciate you being here and hope that we can have you back again um, at the festival, at Old Dominion in general, and certainly hope that you and I run into each other here soon.
Yeah.
Um, I'd like to take a moment to give a very special thanks to Emma Comery, the graduate program assistant who's managed these events, to Catherine Jackson, co-director of the festival, to Cullen Strawn and everyone at ODU Arts, and to thank you all for being here. Please join us next year for the 45th annual Old Dominion University Literary Festival. See y'all then.
Bye bye. Thank you, everyone. Take care.